It's really my honor to be here to share with you guys. So, quick introduction of myself. I'm Tracy, and I was born and grew up in China. I just moved to London in January this year with my husband Philip. So this is my first time to live permanently abroad, and I'm literally feeling like I'm starting my life all over again. So my truth verse today is Genesis 50:20. It says, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." So just for this verse to make sense for everyone, I'm just going to tell you a little bit of my story after I come to the UK. So apart from a lot of the exciting things that I feel about moving to London, I did have a lot of concerns. And one of the biggest concerns that I had since I knew that we're going to move was whether or not I'll be able to find a professional job here in London. So in the culture where I was brought up, I always had the mentality that I wanted to, and I could do professional job. And just in this last year, before we moved, I got an amazing job in an amazing consulting firm where I felt like my career was just about to take off. So leaving that job that I really enjoyed and coming to London was very hard for me already. And what was worse was, so I spent the first month after arriving in London applying for loads of, like a whole range of professional jobs, from entry-level roles to some more strategic ones, but I didn't hear a single positive response from them. And it was then I realized I had to resign to the fact that, okay, probably the most realistic job for me to get at this point of my life was probably Mandarin-speaking sales roles in a department store. And I remember that one day, after all this rejection and just that kind of experience of job hunting, I was sitting on the bed and just feeling so overwhelmed by the sense of disappointment and just feeling lost about my life. And I felt myself crying to God. Why, God? You brought us here to London, and now I'm feeling useless here. And what are you doing with my life? And I was being honest with God, right? Like what Sam mentioned. So, and that was when the Holy Spirit directed me to read the account of Joseph, which I was very familiar with. So, okay, I said, all right, I'm gonna spend my time and reading the account of Joseph. So, and that started an amazing journey with God that night. And this is something I want you to take you through with. So, just to have a quick recap of Joseph's story. Joseph was someone who lived more than 4,000 years ago, and a main character in the book of Genesis. So he started as a favorite son among his 11 brothers. And because of that, his brothers hated him so much though, and they sold him as a slave. And he ended up in Egypt, where he went from slavery to, even worse, being in prison. But after just an amazing and a very sudden, unexpected turn of event, and he just in one day, he rose from being a prisoner to become the second in command over the whole of Egypt. So as I was reading through this amazing ups and downs of Joseph's life the other day, 3 things came out that really stand out to me and brought me great hope and comfort. So the first thing was that it was God who ordained Joseph and who ordained everything, and it was God who brought Joseph to Egypt. So as early as more than 200 years before Joseph was born, God had already told Abraham, which was Joseph's great-grandfather, that your descendants one day, for 400 years, they will live in a country that they do not know, and that country was Egypt. So on the surface, it may look like it was Joseph's jealousy brothers who maliciously sold him to some random slave traders who were passing by. But actually, ultimately, behind everything, it was God who brought Joseph to Egypt, and he had a plan for that. And then the second thing that stood out to me was that God didn't just bring Joseph to Egypt and then just left him there and on his own and dealing everything on his own, but he was with him all the time through all the sufferings and successes. So the phrase, "the Lord was with him," appeared 4 times in this account, twice when he was a slave, and another twice when he was a prisoner. So when I was thinking about it, so And also, one of the records was when Joseph's slave master, and he saw that the Lord was with him. And furthermore, when the Pharaoh appointed Joseph to be the second in command over Egypt, he said something like, "Where can we find a man like you in whom is the Spirit of God?" And this is something amazing which means not only that God was with Joseph throughout all his sufferings and successes, but God's presence was so strong to the point that these foreigners who were idol worshippers recognized God's presence in his life, and he saw something that is radically different with his life. So the third thing that stood out to me was in this verse. It says, although his brothers meant evil to him, but God intended everything for good. And this is something that is really amazing and really spoke to me. What is really good about this, which is very obvious that we can see in the Bible, is that through sending Joseph to Egypt ahead of his brothers, God saved the life of many, not only Joseph's whole household, but also the whole nation of Egypt. And then later on, we see that the whole nation of Israel came out of this household. But today, I want to focus on something that is very subtle and easily overlooked. So when we're reading the account of Joseph, it's very easy for us to think that Joseph is the righteous one. Joseph was the afflicted one. Joseph was the faithful one. He was the smart one, the strategic one, and he was the spirit-filled one. But actually, when I was reading it, I realized something, that Joseph was no different from me. He was not perfect. And in fact, he was a total sinner, because he was a proud teenager before he was sold. In the Bible, it says, knowing that his brothers were jealous of him, he still went around and bragged about the dream that he had, where everyone was bowing down to him, and that made his brother wanted to kill him. And later on, when he got sold to Egypt, he grew into a bitter man. How do we know he was bitter about all those things? Well, he named his firstborn son Manasseh, literally meaning to forget all my hardship and to forget all my household. But can you imagine that daily he saw his lovely son to forget, and he called him, "My lovely son," to forget. And do you really believe that he was able to forget all of his household and all those hardship? No, I don't think so. I was not able to. And later on, we will discover that after 22 years of separation, when he finally saw his brothers, who for so many years thought that he was dead, he heard that his brothers discussing among themselves about their wrongdoings against him. He burst into tears and he wept. And remember, that was already 9 years into his legendary successes. So we could see that there was something deep and undealt with in his life, that God had to spend 22 years of sufferings and successes to deal with that in his life. So to the point that finally he was able to come to the state of worship, to really complete surrender to God and say to his brothers, "Do not be afraid. It was God who sent me before you so that these lives can be preserved." So go back to that night. As I was reading through this passage and just letting the Holy Spirit God minister to me, and I just realized that the God who was working so amazingly in Joseph's life more than 4,000 years ago is the same God who is actually doing something the same in my life. And I just remember that although on the surface it was our decision to move to London from China, but ultimately it was God who ordained it. And it was God who sent us here to London, and he had a plan. And then in the midst of the trauma of job hunting and being rejected, and just the disappointment of realizing, okay, now I have to work in a department store, actually God was with me. And it was God who was opening doors, and it was God who was closing doors. And I believe that he will continue to be with me no matter what job I will be doing. And finally, I saw something deep in my heart as well. I saw that just the crushing disappointment that I felt reveals the idol in my life that I saw, it's the achievement that I was actually worshiping instead of God. I was defining my value based on what I can achieve and based on how people will perceive me. I was just imagining, I was like picturing in my head all my friends getting so excited about me moving to London. Oh, one of the most iconic cities in the world. And what do you do there? Work in a department store. I was just, I was seeing there's pride, and there's idol in my life that God wanted to take that out. So I believe that God is still doing something. The story of Joseph, we might see it as a story of moving from ashes to the top, but it was actually a story of long, deep, painful, but profound internal transformation in someone's life made by God. So just as I was speaking, actually a few days before Wolfie was asking me whether I could do the TruTalk, I got an offer from a department store. And yesterday, I actually just finished the first week of my training. And I realized, again, so much pride in my life, because I saw, wow, there's so much to learn, and there's so much for me to grow, and so many opportunities for me to serve. So, yes, I just really believe that God, through this experience, God ordained this, God was with me, and God would continue to be with me, and He's doing something profound in my life. So it is my prayer today that no matter what circumstances you are in, I don't know whether it's sufferings or successes, but I believe there was God who ordained every details in your life, and He is with you, no matter whether it's tenacities or successes, and He will continue to be with you. And more so, and most amazingly, He is doing profoundly in your life, and He will continue to do great things through your life, so that those people among you, they will look to you and they will say, where can we find a man or woman like you, in whom is the Spirit of God? And those lives will be preserved in eternity, and the name of God will be glorified. Thank you very much.